What's good? What's good? Hey, y'all hear me all right? Joe Brown, salute. What's up? You hear me? Can you hear me? And I don't do a lot of these live streams, so I had to struggle my way through it, especially getting started. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat, man. I want to get in here and talk a little bit about this weekend of boxing that we've seen, that we just kind of just went through over the course of the weekend with all these. I think it was like 3 or 4 cards on simultaneously or throughout the day on Saturday. So some good boxing content out there for sure. A lot for us fans to get a chance to take in. Kind of had our choice on what it was that we wanted to see. Hey, I appreciate it. I see you now saying you hear me. Good, good, good. But yeah, so we had our pick as boxing fans on where we wanted to go to get content. Where we wanted to go to get our fix on boxing for the weekend. And I personally tried to jump around and catch a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But the thing I was most interested in was the two fights I was most interested in were the main event. The main event for the top ranked card. I wanted to see Teofimo Lopez versus Sandor Martin, and I wanted to see the return of Terrence Crawford versus David Avenesian. So I had to try to kind of bide my time jumping around between the two. And but ultimately, once the Crawford fight started, because it started after the Teofimo Lopez fight, I kind of spent my time over there catching that, especially considering that was a fight I paid money to see. So I got that. I got a chance to see what Terrence Crawford looked like in his return. And got a chance to see how Teofimo matched up against Sandor Martin. So all in all, it was a good weekend of boxing. It's card over in Europe took place at the same as well. They had some pretty solid fights on. I didn't catch any of them, but there was some pretty matchups I was pretty intrigued with, and had my opinions on how they would play out. Of course, I went on the Champ Ross and made my picks on those fights, but ultimately, I didn't get a chance to watch the card. Bruce Gas, salute to you. Salute, salute, salute. All right, so I'm gonna get to the comments. Joseph Brown saying salute my guy. Already hollered at him. To bang that like button. Yeah, y'all come in and hit the like button for me. Y'all help me help YouTube, you know, pick up my content and spread, spread it around so I can get more people coming in and checking out the channel so the channel can grow a little bit. Um, what's up, Hype? What's going on? Joseph Brown said mine was the whole top rank card. Hey man, that's a great point, man. Great point. That was a really solid card, almost top to bottom. I mean, there's not a fight on there that wasn't something that I was intrigued to watch. I actually enjoyed, the Keyshawn Davis fight. I thought that was a good step up fight for him. He went in there and really showed where he is. He didn't get the stoppage, but he dominated an opponent that he wasn't by a lot of people's estimation. They may not have expected him to go in there and dominate him like that. Um, Same thing with Xander Zayas. He went in there. He had an opponent that wouldn't go away, but also wouldn't stop throwing back and gave him some two-way traffic. It was a pretty good fight there as well. The big surprise to me was how easily Anderson was able to go out there and handle Jared Forrest. Although he got the early stoppage, second round stoppage, which exceeded my expectations, being that I picked the fight to go 12, well, go to distance. I think it was a 10-round fight, but picked the fight to go to distance. And then he went out there and stopped him, man, the way in which he did, considering that nobody had stopped him in like 10 years, and he's been in there with some really big punchers. But I think he ultimately just got overwhelmed. Forbes was there to fight though. He was there to fight, and he didn't just come in there and just get punched on. He was throwing back, and he landed some significant shots on Anderson. But ultimately, Anderson weathered the storm, because it was in exchanges. Anderson got the better of those exchanges and took care of business. So I was very impressed with Anderson. Eager to see where he goes next. I think they're moving him along properly. I don't think he needs to be rushed. I don't think he needs to be going from where he is to fighting like title contenders right away. I know a lot of people probably feel like he probably could beat a guy like Daniel Dubois, but my concern with that would be if you beat Daniel Dubois and become the WBA regular champion, then where do you go? Because at that point you almost have to continue your progression, and it gets like Daniel Dubois, where Daniel Dubois is cool, but once you get above that, that's a whole different set of circumstances. I mean, you big game hunting at that point. So I think they're moving along right. I don't want to see him rushed into a Dubois fight, not because I don't think he could beat Dubois, that it would be a good fight, but because I feel like once he gets to that level, there's no turning back. You don't go back down to fight the Jared Forrest of the world after you go up and beat a Dubois. Especially considering that he has that WBA regular title. So that's the way I look at that. So yeah, hey, but I'm I don't want to come over here and just talk, what I'm saying, about my opinions on the fights. You know what I'm saying? I'd like for somebody to jump on the panel with me if you want to, if you guys want to. I'm gonna drop the link in Discord. But also another thing is I'm going to I want you guys to keep the chat engaged. You know what I'm saying? Keep dropping these comments so we have something to talk about other than what's on my mind. Because it definitely helps out. All right, so Joseph Brown saying Anderson need not be eating punches like that going forward. This is the heavyweight division. Better be more responsible defensively. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was touching on. He did an excellent job in there getting this man out of there. But he seemed to be 100% offensively minded in those exchanges. He wasn't. I think it was a situation where he felt like the guy wasn't able to hurt him, or that he wouldn't hurt him, or that he was thinking that I'm going to get him out of here first. And last night it worked out for him, but that didn't always going to be the case, especially when you get up there against guys that are guys that are more a little more further along, or excuse me, or a little more talented or a higher level of fighter than Jerry Forrest. No disrespect to Forrest. So that's the way I look at it. The guy went out there and he did his thing. I mean, it's hard and it almost sounds like being nitpicky when you take a fighter who who goes out there and gets a basically a 2 round stoppage. And it seems nitpicky when you go in there, when you come away from it and you have all these critiques about what he could do differently or what he should do differently. But the reality is that he's where he is for a reason, and he should be getting better each and every time out, which is what he seems to be doing. He's gonna make mistakes. He's gonna have to overcome some adversity. He's gonna get hit because this is boxing. And it's gonna be some situations where, at some point it's not gonna go all his way. He's gonna have to overcome, someone else taking the lead in a fight at some point. So right now, it's been every fight I've seen, he's been taking the lead. The fights kind of have gone at the pace in which he set, and the other guy had to try to weather that storm. And in a lot of cases, the way he fights, he doesn't allow a guy much opportunities to gather themselves and recover. He kind of just keeps his foot on the gas and gets the job done. Like I said, a very, very, very skilled guy, but I would like to see a little more attention paid to details on defense. I think that'll take him a lot further than just being so offensively minded. I think on the offensive standpoint, he has it together. I mean, of course, he can always get better, but I think defensively is where he probably has the room for the greatest improvement. That's my take on it. But we saw the Teofimo Lopez fight. Teofimo, that was the main event on that card. He and Sandor Martin, both coming into the fight off of a win. And Sandor Martin had beat Mikey, and then he had another fight in Spain in which he was successful as well. And then, of course, Teofimo Lopez, he fought a few months ago. That was his return bout in his debut at 140. And then now, this was the second bout at 140. And, to me, some could say the jury's still out there on where he's going to be at 140. But I think unless he improves a lot, he's going to have his work cut out for him at 140. I don't think that I just when I think about the top 10 guys at 140, I don't see Teofimo Lopez in the mix. I know what he did at 135, but it's not as if he's come to 140 and he's just tearing it up. I mean, he's kind of struggling in there. You know what I mean? So I think in that fight, I think he had some moments in there where he looked pretty good, but he also had some moments in there where he kind of looked like a fish out of water. He didn't know how to handle Martin's style. He was slipping a lot of punches. Martin he was countering effectively. He dropped him twice with check right hooks, in my opinion. I know one was counted officially, the other one wasn't counted officially, but to me, both of them looked like righteous knockdowns. And I feel like both of them should have been scored as knockdowns. So to me, if you count both of those knockdowns, Teofimo Lopez probably loses the fight. And I feel like, right, that would have been the right call. But, they didn't call it as a knockdown. So, and when it going to the cards, Teofimo won a split decision. And, the rest is history, I guess. I don't know that they'll do a rematch based on Teofimo's statements after the fight, where he basically said Martin was running, he didn't want to engage, he didn't want to fight, and this, that, and the other. So and to me, that's like one of the weakest things to hear from a guy especially after a win that is kind of subpar, or even after a loss, is blaming on the other guy's style, that he didn't do this and he didn't do that. Well, there are two guys in the ring, there are three including the ref. So it's your job to impose your will on your opponent. And if he's out there and it's just going his way, then shame on you. If you haven't in all your career learned how to cut the ring off if a guy's fighting off the back foot. You know, that's on you. That's shame on you, not him. He went out there and did what he was supposed to do. If you're out there doing something well, whether that's just throwing the jab over and over and over with a 1-2 every once in a while, and your opponent can't stop it, and they let you go out there and just pile up rounds, then it's not your responsibility to change it up to something else that's going to be more exciting or that's going to give him a better chance to get into the fight. You go out there and do what's working for you, what's being effective. And I feel like Martin found something that he thought was effective and that was working for him. And he employed it and he stuck with it throughout the course of that fight. And in doing so, he gave himself the best opportunity to win the fight. We got to remember this guy had possibly a broken nose from, I want to say, round 2 on, and I think it was from a clash of heads. So when you factor that in, you know, having to deal with that throughout the course of a 10-round fight, you have to do what you can to put yourself in the best position to win. And what he did was employ the outboxing strategy. And to me, he put himself in the best position to win the fight. It just so happened that you know, the judges didn't see it that way, and you know he has to go back to Spain, have him come over here and come up short in a fight in which he feels like he won. All right, I don't mind him getting in there with Daniel. This is Joseph Brown saying I don't mind him getting in there with Daniel or Fa. Those are fights that can be made, being that they have connection with Top Rank. 100%. Definitely the FA fight, because FA is right there with him on Top Rank. I think Dubois is with Frank Warren, and they are, you know, somehow intertwined with Top Rank. So with that being the case, it should be an easy fight to make. Like I said, my only concern about the Dubois fight would be that once he becomes that you know WBA regular champion, what's the expectation going to be after that? Which direction are they going to move? And I know that Dubois is not fighting like the killers of the division every week, but we also just saw Dubois almost get stopped in the first round of his last fight. So you know there is some responsibility that comes with being a champion, even if it's the WBA regular champion, because you're gonna have to fight within the confines of those rankings. Excuse me. So it's going to require that you're fighting guys that are perceivably a little bit tougher than the previous guy each time out. But it's also, we know that the rankings in boxing are, you know, they're kind of crappy. So, you know, it's not as if, you know, you definitely gonna fight the toughest guy out there because he's ranked number 3. It might just be that his people has did what they needed to do to put him in position to get that number 3 ranking. So, you know, you just never know about that. But I just think that it will put him in a situation where he's constantly having to, you know, having to fight guys that are going to be just a little bit tougher. And he's going to get to a point where he may be fighting, you know, somebody that he may not be ready for. But at the end of the day, he's a pro and he's supposed to be progressing to get ready for the top guys. And he thinks that I think he said that he feels like he's about a year and a half out. And that may be on par, you know, just depending on the amount of fights he has per year. All right, Joseph Brown says T.O. has a lot of outside the ring things that needs to be cleaned up. Also, he needs a new trainer. T.O. has a lot of raw talent. Yeah, and you can see the talent. The raw talent is there. And you know, there's one thing about raw talent. Raw talent can only take you so far. Sometimes you need someone to refine that talent, someone to show you how to harness all this natural talent and natural ability that you got, and to make it more effective for you. But there's also some things from a cerebral standpoint that has to go into how you approach fights and how you view your opposition and things that goes into the actual fight business or the actual fight itself, other than just how talented you are. You could be the most talented. You could be the more talented guy in the ring, go out there and lose a 10-round fight, 9 rounds to 1. So he definitely needs someone that could, you know, basically accentuate his strengths, show him how to use what he had, what's given to him to his advantage, and how to think his way through a fight when things aren't going his way, instead of just feeling like he's just going to do the same thing he's already doing and just do it a little bit harder. And that's typically what happens when a guy goes into a fight and he has a mindset that he's going to do one thing and then it's not working out for him, and he doesn't really have the trainer or they haven't put in the work in the camp to plan for what if this doesn't work? What are we going to do then? So you end up in a situation where the guy doesn't have another idea, doesn't have another strategy, another game plan to go to. So he just does the same thing and just does it a little bit harder and hopes that he's going to impose his will at some point and get the better of the other guy. In a lot of cases, that doesn't work. So I think in that, and I think that was the case last night. I think when Plan A didn't work, they just basically just pushed Plan A a little bit harder. They didn't have a Plan B, they didn't have a Plan C, they didn't have an answer for the outboxing that Martin was able to do, and they didn't have an answer for his countering. They didn't have an answer for his defensive prowess that he displayed in the ring. So with all of that being said, I looked at it like this was another display of Teofimo Lopez and his as a team, Teofimo's team, together, not being on par, for the task at hand. Joseph Brown says the problem is that top rank or at top rank, there's not too many step up fights. I'm checking the rankings to see, but top rank has pretty good match. Yeah, they do. And the thing is, when you're talking about like, take for instance, we hear the side of the street nonsense all the time about guys not being able to fight other guys because they're with other promotional companies and things like that, or they're with other networks and stuff. But the thing is that on certain levels, they have a fairly easy time making these fights. And I think Miller is at the level where his promoter is willing to go out there with to try to get fights with other guys that are with other promotional outfits, or might not necessarily fight on the same network. And I think at the same time, those guys may be willing to work with top rank as well, with the level of fighters that they're going to be trying to go after. It seems to be that it's the biggest issue with the size of the street, etc., or as they say, when you start talking about the marquee fighters, the guys who the networks want to be able to keep on their networks and don't want to send them somewhere else. That's when you start to seemingly get into issues. But Anderson is an undercard fighter right now. So with that being the case, I think it's easier for him to fight guys that may not necessarily be top ranked guys. And I think top rank is more willing to go out and pay to get a guy to come to ESPN and fight him, or even if they have to send him somewhere else just to get him the right fights. I think so. I think with the matchmaking that they have, I think which I do believe Top Rank has the best matchmakers in the sport. I don't think that they're going to have any issues being able to keep him busy and keep him in progressive fights that are going to continue to help him get better as a young heavyweight prospect and eventual young heavyweight contender. So I definitely look forward to seeing how they match him up going forward, but I don't expect it to be, oh, he fought Jerry Forrest, then there's a huge step back and he's fighting some other guy. I know that on the top ranked stable, they have Torres, who is well behind Anderson in terms of where he is as a pro, who is going to be being moved along, probably be able to be moved along just as well as Anderson has, and eventually could find himself being in the same position as a top prospect slash contender going forward. But he's like I said, he's a ways behind Anderson, so I don't see them fast tracking him like they are Keyshawn Davis, for instance, who is only in like his seventh fight, but already fighting, really solid competition. I don't think they'll do that with Torres, not based on the guys I've seen him fight thus far. But we'll see. As Hyphy saying, big ups to Bruce. But yeah, so like I said, I dropped the link. Nobody has jumped on, so I'm gonna try to keep going a little bit. But like I said, Teofimo Lopez, I just would like to see some improvement. I hadn't seen marked improvement with Teofimo Lopez since the Loma fight. I seen what happened in the Cambosos fight. I wasn't surprised that the fight went down the way it did. I was surprised Teo got dropped, But that was like my only surprise in the fight. I wasn't surprised he lost. I wasn't surprised he had a struggle. I was just surprised that he got dropped. That was the only thing that surprised me in that particular fight. But that was based on all of the build up stuff that I saw in the build up. That was his focus was everywhere except for on his opponent. Every time he talked, he was talking about Haney and Tank and this one and that one, and wasn't really focused on the task at hand. And he underestimated his opponent. And his opponent came in there to fight as if his career depended on it, and he went out there and took care of business. And you fast forward to the other fights, he's had at 140. He just really hasn't looked that impressive. I mean, and that's just, it's just what it is. The guy just hadn't really looked as impressive as I would have expected him to look going forward. Okay. So Joseph Brown says, shout out to Tim Bradley for introducing the original side of the street term to the boxing world, getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. Yes, sir. Yeah, that should have been one of his major accomplishments for getting into the sport was that he was the guy who started the phrase, what I'm saying, side of the street, or the one I remember using that before anybody else did. I remember him saying that when being asked about, I think it was asked about, the Floyd fight or some fight not happening. He was like, well, we don't really fight those guys much on the side, they're on the other side of the street or whatever the case may be. And which coincidentally, I remember, when Cotto and Margarito were coming up on the top ranked side of 147, um, and I remember Clottey, and then eventually Pacquiao got there at 147, and you had all of these guys at the same time, and Kermit Cintron was, he was champion at one point at 47 as well, and I remember how one sided the 147 division was at one point, where a majority of the named guys were on the top ranked side, and all you saw was a lot of in-house fights. So Tim Bradley was definitely right at that time. They weren't doing a lot of cross promotional fights. It was more of a, we're gonna fight the guys on our side, y'all fight guys over there, and they really the one big collaboration was the Floyd Mayweather Manny Pacquiao fight that ended up being too big not to happen. So that's where it was. What's up, Mike?
Brother, Wagwan, you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you all right, man. What's up?
Yeah, I'll come in and try to add some spice to the team. You get me?
Go do your
So
thing, man.
which one you want to get to first?
Hey, you pick it, man. You the guest. You pick it.
Well, I want to switch it up and get off what everybody else is talking about. I'm so glad Josh Warrington got his ass whipped on Saturday by
Hey,
Alberto Lopez.
me too.
Yeah,
That's a dirty fighter, man. They,
man,
they
he was trying it again.
Right. Yeah, I went back and watched some of that, man. I saw, the guy out there leading with the head, trying to initiate headbutts intentionally.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
just really going out there trying to get every advantage he could get to put himself in position to be able to get back into the fight to take control, but it wouldn't work. And the thing what disgusted me the most about it was the referee allowed it. The referee wasn't coming in there warning him anything like that. Just let him get away with it as if, when they had the pre-fight discussion, they might have said, hey, it's gonna be okay if I leave with the head, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, fam. And it's crazy because, like you said, it's multiple fights when this guy does this. Um, Also, this dude, he's also on steroids. That's another thing also. He's on steroids, even when he fought Lara. So he be getting his ass whipped with all these advantages. So I'm pretty disturbed because, going around certain communities, you hear people was like, praising him and going for him. And I'm like, this dude is just not that good. I've been, pretty mad at this dude ever since he moved up just to avoid Shakur.
Yeah, I agree, man. Um, and he's it's just I actually liked him several years ago, and he was like one of my favorite fighters from that side of the world. But he's soured on me a lot. You know what I'm saying? And not because of him going out there taking losses, it's because of the things you just mentioned. I just can't support that. You know what I'm saying? And just get behind that consistently. When you see that stuff consistently going on, you kind of realize this is just who this guy is. One time something happens, you kind of can say, okay, maybe something went right. The mistake, this, that, and the third. But when you see it consistently going on, it's hard to just act as if what I'm saying, you don't see what you're seeing. So I think this guy is just a dirty fighter. I think he's one of those guys that his intention is to win, and he doesn't care if it costs somebody their career or whatever the case may be. He just wants to go out there and win and stay relevant with total disregard to the Marquis of Queensberry rules when it comes to the sport.
Yes, brother. Yeah, I'm just pissed off at him because first time, and that's like a real good ass whipping. It's one thing like to get knocked out with a lucky punch or just stop because you was having like a bad night or something. But no, Lara was, like whipping his ass out, boxing him, and then he started beating on him, like really knocked his ass out. So I'm glad he got that beating. And then he didn't want it again in that second fight. Third fight fell through. I
Yeah,
just really don't like this dude.
was the second fight stopped due to a so-called accidental headbutt as well?
Yeah, like very, very early. So it is, and the title. Okay, so the first fight, the title was not on the line. Second one, it was on the line. And so this dude, yeah, he did the intentional headbutt, stopped the fight early. So in that type of situation, titles don't change hands. And like I said, third time they were supposed to fight fell through. So yeah, I just don't respect this dude because he never wanted to even try to avenge that loss also.
Right, and when you got a guy that's doing those type things and bringing that stuff to the fight game, he isn't deserving of much respect, in my opinion. Hey, let me go to the chat for just a second, all right? All right, all right. Joseph Brown said he asked about Thurman. That's when Top Rank was solid on Top Rank Tank back then. Yeah, I think he's saying that it's when basically when Top Rank had all the they had a pretty solid stable back then maybe. Um, Salute Trey X in the building. What's going on? With Joseph Brown. Salute Trey X. Toby Bartlett. Salute Toby Bartlett. Welcome to the chat, man. Joseph Brown and Trey X talking to each other. More people. Everybody just showing each other respect in the chat. Let's see. Want to make sure I wasn't missing anybody comment or anything. Somebody was addressing me or addressing you. But yeah, man, which a couple of them guys did say salute to you, man, in the chat. But anyway, I just think that anytime you got a guy like Warrington goes out there and takes an L, that's a win for the sport of boxing. You know what I'm saying? We don't need these guys being the flag bearers for the sport. Guys like that, they need to get them up out of the sport, man. And there's quite a few of them. I don't like talking about it too awful a whole bunch because some of this stuff is circumstantial. Some of it's, what I'm saying, sometimes what you hear may not be the actual truth, and I'm not on the inside to where I actually know this stuff to be factual. But I definitely, feel like these guys that are habitually getting caught in bad situations or habitually creating bad situations, even with how they fight, hitting behind the head, headbutting and things of that nature, and they're getting away with it. I think that stuff needs to be cleaned up in boxing just as much as the PED usage, just as much as the bad decisions, just as much as something happening in a fight and not being called is what it was, because it was the so-called house fighter who would have been at a detriment had it been called correctly. So those are things that I feel like boxing has to eventually get right sooner than later, because it's definitely not helping the sport.
Yeah, it just it just sucks when you got certain favoritisms, depending on the circumstances, the environment, the setting, location of the fight. That just sucks. Every time these Latin fighters go over to the UK, they do real well. Even if they don't get a W, they gonna give them UK fighters a real tough fight. And it's pretty common that they go over there and get a win. Now, whether the official decision reflects that or not, that's another thing. But they always go over there and they do pretty well. They leave their stamp over there. They leave what they respect and they check.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. Definitely. We've seen over the last several months, last year, a lot of these Hispanic fighters getting calls from Matchroom to go over there, fight on the zone. They're going over there upsetting a lot of those guys. They're not doing their homework on these guys when they're giving them that call. Thinking that there's someone they're gonna bring over there and bolster these guys' resume, and then they bring them over there and then they mess around and hand them an L. And it's back to the drawing board. So, you're definitely right in that regard, man. These guys come to fight, man, and when you see guys go over there, especially someone else's country, and go over there and fight hard and fight to the point that they deserve a victory, but can't get it just because they're not they're not the guy that was supposed to win the fight. That's not good. And I kind of feel that way a little bit about the Sandor Martin Teofimo Lopez fight, where if you say that the judging was on par, you don't have an issue with the judging whatsoever, cool. Let's just look at the knockdown that wasn't scored and look at how that could have impacted the score. Now, I don't remember what the exact scores were, but I mean, if the knockdowns counted, that's definitely a round that Lopez loses 10-8. So that could have probably been the difference in the scoring that maybe would have gave Martin the win that he came over here and fought so hard to get.
Yeah, it's just an unfortunate thing. Sandor was pretty much, he really wasn't, selected. He was just cause he was a replacement, but eventually he was brought in last second. Probably thought they would have caught him slipping or whatever. Obviously that wasn't the case. A guy like Teo, he won't take a fight on short notice because he likely won't even be ready. But Sandor was ready, and yeah, he proved it in a fight. Um, dropped his ass early and put him down again, if you ask me. Um, Man, and I'm still tripping off what he said post fight about, admitting he don't even have power, and how he put his ass down. All right, bro. I'm not hearing you if you're speaking.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I saw. Thank you. I saw Martin post fight where he said Teofimo had some pop, but he said Teofimo barely touched him. He said that he got hit. I want to say he said about 3 or 4 times in the fight. So he basically was saying Teo was out there missing a bunch of punches, but when he did connect, he felt it. And and that's the reality of it. The guy was out there. He was doing the better work, man. He really was doing the better work, and he was effective with what he was doing. And to me, he deserved to win. But I understand that everybody sees it differently. The three judges all see it different from each other. But I felt like that the guy deserved to win the fight.
Yeah, and we could basically say the casual stuff. Now, yeah, Teo, he needs another trainer, a better trainer, somebody else in his corner, all that mess, blah blah blah. But to me, I think this is one of them situations where a guy moves up one division, and now that power advantage you may have had, is gone. His power is probably average up there. You're
Right.
definitely not doing yourself no justice when you are doing leaping left hooks with the chin fully exposed. Like, you're not going to win a title doing that stuff.
Right. And the thing about it, man, you know, I understand confidence. I understand where confidence comes into play and how confidence, you know, is definitely a benefit to these fighters. You don't want to go into situations already feeling like you can't win. Like some guys, you know, had to fight Sonny Liston, and they went into the fight feeling like, you know, I just go in here to do the best I can, but this guy probably gonna knock me out. You know, and so many other fighters throughout history. But I like that T.O. is confident, but I think his confidence borders on brash arrogance and ignorance at times. You know, even when he comes out after having a subpar performance, win or lose, he always talks as if, you know what I'm saying, he went out there and just put on a showcase. Or it was the other guy who just didn't, it's the other guy's fault that he didn't look good, you know, and it was, you know, he bears no responsibility for not being able to get the job done. You know, even when he went out there and lost to Cambosos, he was, you know, remember him saying they thought they won, you know, 11 rounds to 2 or whatever he said, and you know all of that foolishness. He out there turning back flips, you know, and all that after the fight's over with, even the production was pretty much done. He out there in the ring turning back flips, and then all of a sudden he was near death in the fight and going in, and he was lucky to be alive, and you know can't get a guy any credit whatsoever. You know, it's all, you know, he had an off night and he had everything in the world going against him, and that's why this guy beat him. Not because he went out there and fought a dumb fight, not because his opponent was up for the fight and he wasn't, not because his opponent had a better game plan than he did. It was because he had everything in the world going against him, and it just wasn't his night.
Yeah, that's just part of the game of boxing where fighters just always make excuses, unfortunately. And this is a situation with him always having an excuse for your shortcomings. And that's why he won't get better, because it's always the option just to, you know, resort to an excuse instead of just, you know, focusing on the truth. Um, and as we've seen, you know, a lot of athletes, even outside of boxing, they always critique themselves, and they'll do it publicly right after a performance, a competition ends. They'll critique themselves and admit or say, I was not an A plus. I won't give myself an A plus for whatever reason. This dude is like, he don't believe in that at all. No type of accountability. We keep hearing about this takeover, and you know he's just that good, whatever. But it's not showing. Guys like Sandro Martin, who we feel is not at the top of the division, and most of us feel you didn't even win that fight. So this whole takeover thing, and this another guy that people love to call the Four Kings. It's not showing, and it's not just one fight. It's not two fights. It's fights back to back. It's just not showing.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I look at it like he's in the wrong division now to be having all these, you know, to be unsure of himself, to be in a situation where, you know, he doesn't know if he's this or if he's that. You know, regardless of what he says, when he gets in the ring and punches start being thrown, punches start landing, and he has to come up with, you know, strategy in the fight and make in fight adjustments. I have my doubts about the confidence that he speaks actually being, being in action when he's actually in a fight. It seems to me that he has a lot of doubts and a lot of questions when he's in the heat of battle, and he's not getting the answers when he goes to his corner. And I don't know. I'm not going to act as if I hear the conversation because most of the time I have my volume down. But I don't know that maybe he's not getting the instructions that he needs, or maybe he's not. Maybe when he gets the instructions, if they're what he needs, he's not able to go out there and apply it for some reason or another. So to me, it's a sad situation. And for me, I only see it as being sad because of the fact that he goes out there and talks the way he talks, doesn't give credit to anyone else, and everything is about him and how good he is and how great he is, and how everyone, is looking up at him. Even going to a new division where you got guys like Josh Taylor who have done so much. You got Prograde. You got, a lot of other guys already there that have, that are making noise and been busy, been consistently fighting other top guys in the division. And you go in there talking as if you're head and shoulders above these guys coming to their division. And the thing is, I don't see him fighting any of the top 10, any guys in the top 10. Just just willy nilly, just going into a situation and saying, "Hey, I want that guy." Now I know the Sandor Martin fight ended up being a late replacement, but I don't see him, going after guys like Matias, going after the Prograde, going after, the Russell kid or any of these other guys. But he talks as if he's the top dog in the division already. So if that's the case, then he should be ready and willing to engage with these other guys that are actually legit contenders in that division.
Yeah, Top Rank, they got the best matchmakers in the business, by far none. And yeah, they definitely know, they can see it. It's this dude. He's you almost say he's really not regressing, but it's just more so he's been exposed to not be as good as he was thought to be, and now there's definitely no progression happening. So they definitely going to put the brakes on this dude.
Like
a title shot.
like
I'm sorry,
what's
go on.
his, yeah, my fault. Kind of like I know he's actually way more accomplished, but you could kind of look at what happened with Berlango, right? Everything was, they had high hopes and they were expecting his ceiling to continue to rise, and then all of a sudden after a few fights in which he doesn't look like what they thought he was going to be, now all of a sudden his progression is halted, and he's like he you would have thought he would have been on that card this weekend, but he wasn't on the card. You know what I'm saying? And his level of opposition hasn't continued to rise because they realize there's things he's going to have to work on to get better before he gets beat. And I think with Teofimo Lopez, I think the word that comes to mind with me when I look at it is you have to wonder, has he plateaued? Has he gotten as good as he's going to get? And he can only sustain that or go down. That's my concern.
Well, has he plateaued? We'll never know. But one thing we can say is growth is less likely to happen with his current training situation. Once again, none of us have respect for his father as a trainer. And I've also heard that they said like he's added just other people to his team. It's like, just personalities where they're not all on the same page as far as the advice and instructions that they give, even for preparations. So it seems like his whole team just needs some restructuring. But yeah, I just definitely with being trained under his dad, I definitely don't see him coming close to reaching whatever his peak potential may be. Yeah, I keep hearing people saying he needs a trainer such as like an Ismael Salas because his defense is, pretty questionable. But I don't know if a guy like Teo would be able to train under a strict trainer that's used to already having, guys that's, better than Teo, has trained names bigger than, has been in, big championship fights. Whereas Teo is not used to having another voice in his ear, and we don't know if he's going to listen. But based on the arrogance, you might question, if he is going to listen or not. See, I really don't know how things are going to pan out for this guy. But ESPN, they definitely need to stop referring to him as the former undisputed champion, because that's just not the case.
Right. I feel like that only adds to it. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like man, don't encourage this nonsense. And that's kind of the way I look at it. I think what you said about the trainer situation, with him, would he be receptive to a new trainer? Would he be able to buy into what they're trying to get him to do, and would he be able to really take advantage of working with another trainer? And I have those concerns myself. I think back to Emmanuel Stewart, for as great a trainer as he was. there were certain fighters that, although they were great fighters before he even got them, and they came to work with him, and it just didn't work out. And he would kind of allude to, because he's not really, he wouldn't really want to throw a fighter under the bus, but sometimes his statements would kind of lead you to believe that the guy just didn't want to listen, or the guy didn't want to make the sacrifices that he was asking him to make and things like that. So he wasn't hard up for no fighter, so he wouldn't keep him around. And so that, you see that happening throughout boxing over the years, where you'll have a trainer fighter situation where you feel like it should be a match made in heaven, and they work for one fight, get a win, and then all of a sudden the guy goes back to his old trainer, or he's out trainer shopping again, because it just doesn't jive for the two of them. And I can see that being the case with Tio, depending on who he tries to work with and how strict and stern they are and how regimented they are. That it could be an issue for Tio adhering to what they wanted him to do to try to get better.
Yeah, definitely, brother.
Let me hit the chat for a minute. So let me see. Joseph Brown said Warrington is the only guy who constantly uses those tactics in the UK. Great Britain stays turning a blind eye, especially if it favors. Oh, you said, I guess you're saying he isn't the only guy, maybe. But either way, you're saying that they turn a blind eye if it's the guy they favor, if the situation favors their fighters. Toby Bartlett. Why is his name? I'm not able to read it. Toby Bartlett says, I don't know if you guys know, but Leeds Football Club, that's what we call soccer, who Warrington support, are known in the UK as Dirty Leeds, historically, because of their dirty tactics and the way they play. Well, he ought to go play for him, and he fit right in with them. That's an interesting tidbit. Yeah, I don't really follow football or soccer that much, but yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. Leeds have cleaned up a bit in recent years, but the fans are still very proud of the tag. Wow. Maybe they're proud of Warrington too then. Says Trey X says, I bet Teofimo Lopez by decision. I bet Teofimo Lopez by decision at minus 140. I'll take the results. That's right. Hey, if you got money on it and that's the way it goes, most definitely. Robbery or otherwise. I mean, what goes in the books is how it's gonna pay out. Joseph Brown said, you see this from Top Rank also when fighters stay pushed, like Teofimo knocked down, not being called. Same happened when Bud versus Green Machine, Mean Machine. Yeah, I mean, to me that was a knockdown. I mean, but what Bud got hit, in the exchange, and he dropped to a knee. I mean, that's by definition a knockdown. That's the way I saw it. And nobody is gonna ever convince me otherwise. Regardless of how they called it. Even when I talk about it today, I always say when Mean Machine dropped Bud. Not when Bud slipped and he got touched by Mean Machine. That was a knockdown. Joseph Brown, but he was getting away with that at 135, leaping hooks at 140. You can see that's not going to work. Yeah, he definitely, I'm saying, all this. He needs to clean up his work substantially. He's going to be a force at 140. He says he's going to be undisputed at 140 as well, even though he wasn't undisputed at 135. So Joseph Brown said Tio has one holding him accountable on his team. I think he said no one. I think you mean no one holding him accountable on his team, and because of that, he will get exposed very shortly at 140. 140 shortly. 140 ain't for play. 140 has some real killers at the top. Hey, I agree. I not only at the top, man. I think 140 is one of the deepest divisions in the sport. It doesn't get the shine that 147 does. Doesn't get the shine that 135 does. But I'd say top to bottom, 140 is deeper than 135 and 147. And definitely a division where there's a lot of good fights can be made at any given time. Toby Bartlett says Teofimo Lopez's dad giving crazy instructions in between rounds in the Camboso fight. I ain't seen the Sandor Martin fight yet, but I can imagine you can't imagine him changing much since then. Yeah, I understand that. All right, so here's a name I haven't seen in a while. DB, salute DB. DB says big salute D Low. It's a good Saturday of boxing. All right. So Toby Bartlett telling Joseph Brown Teal definitely needs to keep away from Prograis, or he's gonna get real. He's gonna get real hurt unless he improves. Joseph Brown says, problem with Tio can't be moved slow. Top Rank has to feed him to one of their other fighters at 140 they want to build. Yeah, I mean, and that's the way it should be. All right, if you bring a guy up and you're bringing him along, you put him in the fights that are supposed to showcase him. You got him on main events, on big fight weekends, and the guy isn't moving along like he's supposed to. What you should do is bring one of your other fighters that you're trying to move along as well, and let the cream rise to the top. And if that other guy is able to go out there and beat him and take his position and catapult himself by going out there and beating him, then that's the way it was meant to be. If he's able to turn that guy back, maybe that's exactly what he needed to realize that, hey, your spot isn't guaranteed. You got to come out here and earn it. So he goes out there and he turns such a guy back, then all of a sudden, he may be back, as they say. But the way things are going right now, I just think that he's going to be in a situation where he's probably going to end up losing to some, not to one of those type guys. It'll be to someone that they brought in as one more confidence builder, and then he'll go out there and lose if nothing changes. Let's see. It's DB telling Trey X what up. Trey X saying salute to DB. Crawford didn't slip. He got caught right on the chin with a right hand. No disputing that from me. And he got dropped. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that was just what it is. And, like I said, nobody's going to convince me otherwise. I mean, I saw it when it happened. I looked at it a bunch of times before I went and made my video talking about it. And, you know what I'm saying? And here it is years later. I still feel the same way. Man got dropped. And this is what it is. All right. So what you got on there, Hodge?
I mean, to me, I don't even know why people still bringing that topic up, about whether he, got knocked down or, whatever. Look, me looking at it as a viewer, to me, I expected that to be called as a knockdown. If I seen that from any other fighter in this situation, I would expect that to be called as a knockdown. People, they like to pick and choose. 1 minute, oh, that was a knockdown, they didn't call it, and oh man, that was a slip. It just depends, whoever's fighting or whatever. But I mean, hey, look, he got knocked down, and you seen what happened when he got up. That's just part of boxing. People do get knocked down. Most of your fighters been knocked down.
Yeah, and it's like the Zayas fight, right? I think that was Xander Zayas. He hit the guy, and the ropes kept him up. You know what I'm saying? He flailed his arm. He actually grabbed onto the ropes, keep him going down. And a lot of refs would have called it a knockout. To me, if I'm looking at a fight, I always say that's a knockdown. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of refs, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes, I ain't gonna say a lot of refs, but sometimes the ref doesn't look at that as a knockdown, and they let the action continue. And if you look at the Spence versus Ugas fight, a lot of refs would have called that a knockdown. The ref they had that particular night didn't see it as a knockdown, maybe because he felt like it was partially his fault by not stopping the action like he was supposed to, or like if he's saying stop, he needs to get in there and make sure the action stops. So maybe that's why he didn't call it a knockdown. But whatever the case may be, all you can go with is how it, just like in football, how do they call it on the field? That's what stands. And so in the heat of the action, the ref called it a certain way, and that's the way it goes down officially. But that doesn't change the way I see it. If I felt like something was a knockdown, when I talk about it, I'm gonna talk about it as I saw it. And we can put the caveat on it that officially it wouldn't rule that, but I'm not gonna skirt around it and say, well, I don't want to say that because I don't want nobody mad at me because they don't agree. I look at it as it was knockdown, and that was a knockdown.
Yeah. Luckily it really didn't come into play because, he won the fight with a clear stoppage. But, like I said, the fact is we can still talk about whether we think it is or not. But, shit had happened. Look what happened when he got up. Like I said, that's part of boxing.
For sure. So, man, time winding on down. Let's get into this Crawford fight, man. What's your take on it? What you think about it?
All right, so this was a fight, coming off that layoff and everything. yeah, he's used to that, but at the same time, for me, I just think it's clear that he's definitely lost a step in his fight. Nonetheless, he's getting smarter, more intelligent as a fighter. So even though he's lost a step, he's able to, still beat guys, in a different style. It did look like this was sort of like a sparring match. It was funny because it's a lot of times when Crawford was pumping out his jab, it literally looked like he was hitting just a heavy bag as far as like the way that he was throwing punches, the type of combos and stuff. How he was moving Avanesian back sometimes. I swear it's like he was working on a heavy bag at times. But my critique of him, I definitely didn't like the amount of times that I seen him get hit. For the pound for pound best fighter, or elite fighter, whatever. And maybe that's just attributed to reflexes slowing down. Like I say, somebody could say that it's part of the ring rust. I don't know, but whatever it is, I still didn't like seeing him get hit that much, especially for it to be a pound for pound fighter. So yeah, that would be my biggest critique. Would be the defense.
Yeah, I think and I think one of the things about Crawford is he's never been like this defensive savant. He gets hit. And a lot of times if people get so fixated on the outcomes of his fights or how he takes over a fight down the stretch or whatever, but don't really necessarily look at some of the shots he's taking in there, which is boxing. You're gonna take some shots. But a lot of times with guys, when they're fighting a person that they feel like they really have the upper hand in a fight, that they go in there and they're willing to take two or three to get five or six, or take one to get two, whatever. But my concern was that I felt like Evanesian was a big enough puncher that Bud should have had enough respect for him not to be getting hit like that. So if that's the case, and if he knew that going in, if he's getting hit, it ain't because he want to get hit. He's getting hit because the other guys, making it happen, and he's not taking it away. Ultimately, like I said earlier about Anderson, I hate to over critique a guy when they go out there and get a spectacular stoppage. But at the end of the day, it's boxing, and all of it's up for discussion. There's a lot of things I think he could have done better. I didn't like the get into exchanges as often as he did, because I look at it like, if you're the superior fighter with superior ring generalship, superior skills, you don't have to get in exchanges. You shouldn't have to get in exchanges with a guy that you're supposed to be levels above. Excuse me. So to me, it just made me wonder that what's going on. Is it the ring rust? Is it is it his age catching up with him, or is it just that he's employing a strategy that he wants to go out here and show and prove something? I do feel like you said about the heavy bag situation, that he was out there work. It looked like almost he was out there working on some things. You know what I'm saying? Like, this guy, if you got a guy in a high guard, and he stay in a high guard, that's about as close as you're gonna get to a heavy bag in the ring. So the guy, if you can keep the guy's hands at home in the high guard, that gives you an opportunity to throw out some jabs and some hooks to the body, and kind of just touching, with all speed shots, and then get him to eventually start to drop that high guard, and then you start to try to vary the speed on your punches and things like that. But to me, I just looked at it, overall as a performance, with all things being considered, I think that he went out there and had a stellar performance in front of a home crowd, which also is another thing that plays a part into it. This guy doesn't fight at home often. So him fighting back at home for the first time in, about 5 years, big long layoff, the fallout of the Spence fight and all the criticism he's taking, that he may say he don't get caught up in it, but the evidence is there. You see him online arguing with fans. So, all of those things, and then, like I said, that, and then the fact that it's been about 13 months since he last fought, all that was a recipe for a little bit of suspense. And like Trey X and I talked about, that was the only thing that was really intriguing about the fight, in terms of how gave it any type of credibility, other than the fact that Evanesian was indeed, a top 10 top 10 contender with all the sanctioning bodies. But to me, the one issue was the biggest concern was the long layoff. And that was the only thing that really added a level of suspense to the fight. So what do you got to say about that? All right, so Hyphy done dropped off on me. So Joseph Brown said, "Y'all still hear me?" I got a phone call. Make sure y'all still hear me. All right. So anyway, Joseph Brown said Crawford was probing with the jab, using it as a rangefinder, and he used the left to stab to the body, touch upstairs, throw the right hook around the guard, shoot the uppercut through the middle. Yeah, right. Yeah, like I said, he was working. He was working on some things in there. And when you got an opponent just staying in the high guard, that gave an opportunity for him to go out there and do what he did in terms of getting the ring, shaking the ring rust off and getting this level of comfort back, getting into his rhythm, getting warmed up and such, without a whole lot of return fire. Evanescence, he landed some shots, but I think more times than not, his hands was at home in the high guard defending himself, even when he was walking forward. All right, so Joseph Brown and Trey, so y'all can hear me. I appreciate that. You said D-Lo, you called your 6th round stoppage shot. Yeah, I actually had called the 6th round stoppage. I said it's gonna stop him at 40 seconds in the 6th. We left in the 6th round. That's what I said about a week ago. And he stopped him. I think officially it was 217, 216, 217. So about 44 seconds or so, somewhere along in there left in the fight, left in the 6th round when he stopped him. So I mean that's as good as I'll ever get with a prediction. I wasn't able to capitalize on it financially because I just wouldn't. I had stuff going on. I don't really want to get into it. But I wasn't able to really put any money on it because I was trying to make a donation to help out somebody in a situation. So that was more important to me than betting some money. You know what I'm saying, for my own personal gain. So I think with Crawford, coming off of this fight, I'm hopeful, like a lot of other people are, that the Spence fight will be next. Um, I'm not gonna hold my breath, of course. Just like I haven't held my breath for the last 5 years or however long it's been since Crawford came up for 40. That fight is being kicked around. But I will say I'm hopeful. One of the things that gives me a little added hope about it is the fact that Spence isn't talking about the Thurman fight. But that doesn't mean that it's not coming up next. I mean, we know that the WBC has ordered the fight. We know that the WBC wants to fight, but we also know that the WBC is very inconsistent with what they do in terms of calling these mandatories and actually making guys take fights or strip them. So it could be a situation where Spence is holding out for the Crawford fight. It could be that, if you look at it, the downside would be that Spence hasn't announced a fight yet, and you would have to think that the earliest he will fight anybody, including Thurman, would probably be mid-February at this point. Mid-February, early March, would put him in a situation where he hasn't fought in close to a year, because I think he fought last April, if I'm not mistaken. So, with that being the case, it's just one of these situations where, because of the lack of fights going on with the top tier guys, everybody fighting once a year and things like that. Because even Thurman, I think he fought February last year. You got all these guys, nobody's really coming in fresh. And now here it is, Bud just got him one under his belt. So if they were to make the fight next, you will have a situation where you got one guy who just fought very recently, versus another guy who hasn't fought and it would be probably a year by the time they get in the ring. And then the same thing with Thurman and Spence. Thurman and Spence, at least both of those guys have been out of the ring about the same amount of time. So with them two fighting each other, it's more of a equal situation. Even though Spence has been a lot more active over the last several years than Thurman, at least they've been out of the ring around the same time since their last fight. But ultimately, these guys may not care anything about that. They may, say, well, let's get this opportunity. We know Errol Spence was just in a car accident last night or yesterday. Fortunately for him, he wasn't hurt. It was just damage to his car. I think his car is totaled. But aside from that, he walked away from the fight unscathed. Walked away from the accident unscathed. Excuse me. But that's just another thing that makes you say that we can't take these fights for granted. We got to get them done. They got to make these fights happen because anything can happen. This is life. These guys aren't moving around in the world just like the rest of us, and anything can happen from one day to the next. So the fact that there's another accident that could have derailed his career once again, and he was fortunate to escape. But that's go to show that anything can happen, and you could be an active fighter one day to being in the hospital the next. So fortunately he walked away from it, and I hope that they can get this fight done soon. So Joseph Brown said, Spence don't do stay busy fights. He will go right into the Crawford fight. I hear that, but I also know that Crawford fight been on the table forever, and Spence has fought other people. So you know what I'm saying. I don't think I hope he will go right into the Crawford fight, but at the same time, I already know what's gonna come behind that too. But if that's what he does, if he don't fight, and I don't see Thurman as a stay busy fight, to be honest. If he fights Thurman's a tough contender in the division. Guy at one point was number one. He was known as the top guy in the division, and then I think when Spence became the number one guy, Thurman was viewed as the number two guy. And then of course Bud came into the situation. So I look at Thurman as 1, 2, as probably top 3 through 5, welterweight. You know what I'm saying? Probably 3. When you look at what he's done, not necessarily what he's done recently, but his accomplishments, and you look at him as a fighter and how his fights go, I'd say he's a top, 3 or 4 welterweight. He's definitely done more than the young guys that are up and coming. That doesn't mean that I think he'll go out there and just beat everybody. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt on who he was, who I've seen him to be. So I can't say that he just beats Stanionis. I can't say that he just beats Boots, or he just beats Virgil Ortiz, or and those guys. But at the same time, I feel like if he gets to fight Errol Spence Jr., I feel like he can do as good with him as those guys can. But we'll just see, and if Errol foregoes the Thurman fight and he goes straight into the Crawford fight, much respect to him, and I'll be glad to see that fight no matter how it shapes up, whether that be March of this year, whether that be March of next year, whether that end up being somewhere like August of next year. I just want to fight sooner than later, because there's always something that can come up in the rear of the fight. Terrence Crawford get out there last night, get caught with the perfect shot, and get dropped and get stopped. You know what I'm saying? Then there's no talk of an Errol Spence Jr. fight for him. So I definitely feel like they need to go ahead and try to get it done. But if the WBC is pressing for the Thurman fight, and there's no way to get past that, and if Spence has to take the fight, then that's just what it is. Right? Then he just has to take that fight. But I think Spence has enough cachet to where he can make some things happen if he don't really want that fight. But I think he'll have to have the support of PBC to do so, because we know that when Ugas was the WBA champ, the WBA had ordered Ugas versus Stanionis, and they weren't willing to move off of that. They were saying that it's going to happen. They're not going to allow Spence and Ugas to fight for a unification. And then everything got quiet for a little while. And then next thing you know, they started saying Spence and Ugas were going to be allowed to fight, and they were going to order Stanionis to fight they were going to order Stanionis to fight Butayev, if I'm not mistaken, is how it was. And he fought Butayev, fought James, and Stanionis fought someone else, and then they fought each other. However it was, we know that those guys, eventually we got Stanionis and Butayev, and we got Spence and Ugas. So Spence and his team was able to maneuver around that order by the WBA. So it could do the same thing with the WBC. They can move around that order and find a way to to make the fight happen. The difference is that Thurman's the WBC guy, the PBC guy as well, and they may want to make sure that Thurman's taken care of, and they may have promises may have been made to Thurman. I know the WBC says they were trying to make up to Thurman for something. So, it's just one of them situations where you just got to let it play out and see how it goes. Joseph Brown said Thurman is just a name at this point. Barrios doesn't make me say, yeah, he's the key. I didn't like what I saw in the Barrios fight. I give him credit for going out there and dominating the fight. I mean, don't get me wrong, but with Keith Thurman being Keith Thurman, I expected more. But at the same time, I also didn't expect. I didn't pick him to go in there and get a stoppage just because of the circumstances. Him coming off the layoff. A lot of these guys don't look very good coming off these year-long layoffs. They're not going out there to get stoppages. So I kind of said, I don't know to keep stops, even though Barrios was coming into the fight off of a stoppage. It was one of the things where I just didn't want to go out on a limb and say he's going to stop this guy. And when it played out, that's the way it played out. He didn't get the stoppage. So but he did look good. He got it ring rust off, and he was impressive enough in there. Did he do enough to me to catapult him to a WBC mandatory? Absolutely not. To me, that was already a predetermined thing that with Thurman, you go in there and just get you a win, and we'll make you the mandatory, because Barrios had no business even being in the WBC top 10 rankings, considering that he was just coming out of 140. And as a WBA regular champion who had just went and got knocked out, really wasn't no reason for him to go from being where he was to being a top 10 WBC welterweight and fighting in a title eliminator versus Thurman. It just didn't make any sense. So that's the way I saw it. I just looked at it like, well, that's what they done, and they had their purpose and their reason for doing it, and that's what we ended up getting. Hyphy, you back?
Yeah, my apologies, brother. I believe
all right, so
lost reception.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
All right, who was you cooking on now? I just heard you mention the name Thurman. So you was mentioning Thurman?
Hey, go ahead, man.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know what you was touching on last.
Oh, I was just talking about Keith Thurman and him and Barrios having that bout to determine the WBC mandatory, and how it was pretty much predetermined that that WBC just wanted Thurman to get a fight under his belt, and that was going to be enough to put him in that situation to be able to be a mandatory. But I also talked about how I feel like that if Spence doesn't really want that fight, and if he could get PBC on board with him, the WBC will play ball. And if he wants to go into a Crawford fight, then I feel like the WBC will play ball just like the WBA did when they ordered the Ugas versus Stanionis fight and said that they weren't going to allow the unification with Ugas and Spence. But then a little bit of time passed and they came back to the table. All of a sudden, we got Spence and Ugas in the unification.
Yeah, the WBC has a funny way of working in general. I mean, nobody ever thought that fight between Thurman and Barrios was going to be official eliminator based on both of those guys' past. So yeah, the WBC, they can always surprise you. The same way they could pull some strings, they could pull more strings. I definitely believe that. I mean, it's common sense that if y'all think Thurman is a big name at this point, which I think has been proven that he's not, at least from the financial perspective, you're definitely going to make way more money dealing with Spence. So you might want to make Spence happy and lean towards him. I mean, after all, that's what these sanctioning bodies are supposed to be about. So yeah, I think that some strings can be pulled to satisfy certain people behind the scenes. I don't think step aside money has to be paid, being that nothing has been mandated. But if Earl, as far as that whole stance of just not wanting that fight, if that's his stance, I'm still fine with that because, like you said, Thurman had his, plenty of opportunities. I mean, so many years went by and, he just never wanted that fight. And now that the tables have turned, it is what it is. And, for us, Thurman really isn't relevant because he's not trying to, prove himself. I mean, we talk about these guys, you're in this, not fighting anybody, relevant, no killers, but Thurman, it's a what have you done for us lately? You're living off your name, brother.
Right. Right, I agree. He's resting on his laurels, man. It's what I done all these years ago, who I'm supposed to be, and I go. He goes out there and just has an impressive win over a guy that he was heavily favored to beat. Um, Although it could have been more impressive, but then he goes from that to saying, basically he wants the Errol Smiths and Terrence Crawfords of the world. He just needs a few months or whatever. But then we go to where we go from that to him coming with he just wants to be active as well, which is what I want to hear. I want to hear these guys saying, what I want to hear these guys talking about fighting more, especially a guy like Keith who spent so much time on the shelf. So then you get to a situation where, okay, here's Keith, got the win over not Stanley Owens, got the win over Barrios, and then it's like, okay, if he does want to be active, who is he willing to fight? Because if he has an Errol Spence Jr. or WBC mandatory in his back pocket, he's not going to go out there and risk that against somebody who's a live dog. And Joseph Brown kind of touches on it in one of his comments. Let me get to that in just a second. So Joseph Brown says, not to mention Thurman approaching another year layoff. Yep, which I said I think February makes a year. Can't be having this many gaps in your prime years, not fighting for me to take you a serious threat. Need to see it against a Stanionis or a Boots. Yeah, and I think not even that, man. There's a lot of other guys out there, man. But at the same time, if you just fought Barrios and the fight went in the manner in which it did, fight somebody, in between that time. Don't keep allowing yourself to spend 8, 9, 10, 12, 13 months on the shelf waiting for a fight. I mean, you're not gonna get any sharper by having all this stagnation in your career and all these pauses in between your bouts. At some point, it's gonna catch up with you. And we've seen it happen to Thurman time and again. If you really want to be truthful, you go back and look at the Josecito Lopez fight that he had before the Pacquiao fight. I mean, that fight was a life and death type situation for Thurman at points, and that's a guy that was brought in to be a showcase opponent for Thurman. So Joseph Brown also, now this is what I was talking about. He says to keep it all the way real, Keith Thurman chose the WBC route to avoid a Stanionis in the WBA. That could have been a solid fight for me to take him serious. I agree. And that's a fight that, there's no foregone conclusion as to who wins that fight. I can see avenues in which Stanionis can go out there and beat Thurman, and I can see avenues in which Thurman could beat him. But I would have to favor the more active, younger fighter who has been consistently going out there fighting, and that would be Stanionis. All right, shout out to Social Sciences. That's my first official super chat on the channel. I'll make sure I remember that and archive that in the history books for my channel. That's the first ever super chat, man. Much appreciation. I appreciate you coming through. I appreciate you, giving your hard-earned money to help support the channel. Because I definitely want to grow this thing, and there's a couple things out there that I want to invest in to help improve my channel. But I kind of got to get to the point where I can't keep pouring money into stuff that's not paying me back. So I got to get to a point where I see enough to invest enough, because I have so many different things going on in terms of different avenues and things I'm invested in, trying to grow and nurture, not just on YouTube, but just in general. So I definitely have to kind of be a little more responsible with what I'm pouring my money into. So even like you see on the StreamYard, I'm using the free version because I'm not at a point right now where I feel like it'll pay me back to pay $20 a month for a paid version right now, or $30, whatever it is. But I much appreciation, man. I really appreciate that super chat. It means a lot, man. Like I said, it's the first ever donation I've got to the channel whatsoever, as far as I can recall. If I'm missing somebody else's donation, charge it to my head, not my heart. All right, Hyphy, what you got on that Keith Thurman stuff, man?
Yeah, I believe I was speaking to you when I was saying I really don't know if Thurman is even a top 5 contender at the moment, based on just based on the landscape, because there's 3 guys that I definitely feel he cannot beat, which would be Ennis, Ortiz, and Stanionis. But at this point right now, I don't know if he would beat a Rashidi Ellis if he got the call for that. I don't know if he would beat a Mean Machine. And I know this brother has a couple losses, but I'm being dead serious. I really don't know if he could beat a Mean Machine, who I still rank like a highly contender. I still consider him a good welterweight. He might not be at the top of the top, but he's still a good welterweight. I don't know if Keith could beat him right now. I would really slightly favor him over Keith right now. I'll be right back.
Yeah, for me, piggybacking off what Hypey just said about Keith, not favoring Keith against a guy like Mean Machine. I don't know. It definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't look at it as a gimme. Because looking at how they would match up and the size and all of that stuff. Mean Machine is like 5. I think he's like 5'9". He's pretty big guy for the division. And he definitely has a pretty solid pedigree and things of that nature. But he's just, it is, the fact is that he is twice a knockout victim, once to Crawford, once to Ortiz. But at the same time, he bounced back quite nicely against Mikhail Fox, although Fox is not known as the biggest puncher. But that said, had Keith Thurman been fighting Mean Machine in his return bout instead of Barrios, I would have favored Mean Machine. Keith with a little bit of rust off of him and things like that. Maybe I give Keith a better shot at beating Mean Machine. But then again, here we are looking at another year layoff for Keith Thurman by the time he gets back in the ring. I just don't think Keith is at a point in his career where those long layoffs, while they may give him a chance to rest up and let his body heal, I think that they're also a detriment to him, because how do you get in a rhythm if you're constantly stopping anything? If it's anything, if it's anything that you're doing and you need to get in a rhythm at doing whatever it is, get into a pattern, get into comfortability, but you're constantly stopping. I just don't see how you can put yourself in a position to be optimal, to be your very best. And I think regardless of how good to great people think Keith Thurman has been throughout the years, all of these inconsistencies and all of these breaks and all these recesses, all these long layoffs, they will take their toll on it at some point. And that's how you get a guy of the Keith Thurman's pedigree struggling against a guy like Josecito Lopez, or you get a guy like Keith Thurman unable to duplicate the level of success that Tank Davis had versus Barrios, albeit at a lower weight. But that being said, I don't want to take anything away from what he did against Barrios, because he had a pretty good performance in that fight. He definitely was in control. Joseph Brown says, D-Lo, you'll get. Hey, man, I appreciate the encouragement, man. I think the biggest issue with me on this, and like I said, I'm not on YouTube trying to get rich. I'm not on YouTube trying to be able to quit my job or anything like that. I like what I do for a living. I make decent money. I don't, I just like doing this. But of course, if I'm going to go ahead and do it like anybody else, if I'm going to put money into it, I like to see some return on that investment. But ultimately, if I get on here and don't make a dime and I come on here and do live streaming and it's only me and you in the chat, then I'm going to come in here and we're going to talk this boxing. You know what I'm saying? And that's just what it is. And but I definitely appreciate, the words of encouragement. I appreciate anybody dropping any type donations to help the channel. But I'm not going to come on here, with the pretense of I need people to come on here and make donations, and I need people to do this and do that, or I'm gonna shut the stream down, stuff like that. I'm not on that type of time, and I'm not gonna get to that place, no matter how much the channel grows or doesn't grow. So Joseph Brown said, those are good points. There are too many questions around Thurman, and he refused to take a dangerous fight for me to take him serious. Yeah. And I don't think that situation is unique to Thurman when it comes to guys, having a quote unquote carrot dangled in front of them to risk that. I mean, if I'm gonna keep it all the way 100 on this subject, if you look at, even though these guys, Virgil and Boots, are pretty much unproven, you know what I'm saying? As far as like the level of opposition, I'd say Virgil's level of opposition is further along than Boots. But if we know that they're the next guys up, and they're the young, hungry, dangerous, up and coming guys at 147, and they're at the top. They're the ones that's viewed as the guys that are gonna, if they stay in the division, they're viewed as the guys that are gonna be the top of the division down the line. So when you look at that situation, and you got those two guys right there, it's not advantageous for guys like Thurman and Crawford, Spence and Crawford, and even Thurman, who have potentially really big fights right there, that they're just negotiations away from making, to risk those fights being derailed against young, hungry, up and coming guys for fractions of the exposure, fractions of the revenue. So I understand that. It ain't my favorite part of the sport, but I understand them doing that. If we go back, I'd say about maybe 20 years, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I don't know. Time flies. Maybe it's been 20 years. You had Oscar De La Hoya. He had a fight with Bernard Hopkins in his back pocket, and Oscar De La Hoya went and fought. Well, he didn't go. I don't think he went to Germany. I think the fight was in California. But you had the German. Oh man, his name just slipped my mind. But anyway, the guy came over and fought Oscar, and everybody felt like it was a robbery. Felt like he beat Oscar, and Oscar got the decision, but I feel like he only got the decision because the Bernard Hopkins fight was in his back pocket, and it was a fight everybody was already looking forward to. It was Felix Stern is the name of the guy I'm talking about. Felix Stern came to California, if I'm not mistaken, is where the fight was. He outboxed Oscar, and but Oscar got the decision, and he was able to go ahead and had the B-Hop fight. But if you look at on the flip side, you had Floyd Mayweather and Zab Judah had a fight pretty much signed, and Zab went and fought. He fought. Man, I hate when this happens. Who was it? Anyway, Zab Judah had a fight. Sorry, y'all. Zab Judah had a fight in the interim, and he lost that fight. And so he went. He had the Mayweather fight in his back pocket, and then he lost the Mayweather fight. I mean, he lost the interim bout, but because the Mayweather Zab Judah fight was so big, and people were looking forward to it so much, they still went ahead and had that fight. And of course, as we know, Mayweather went on to beat Zab Judah. But my point is that Zab Judah was, basically in a situation where he took a fight that he knew he had to win in order to preserve his Floyd Mayweather fight, and he still went out and he lost. But fortunately for him, he was able to still get that fight. And when he got that fight, he was able to, of course, make a lot of money and have the big fight that everybody wanted to see. But it was a situation where it could have very well derailed the Mayweather fight, and in most situations it does. That's why when you talk about Oscar versus Felix Stern, Oscar got that decision and Stern didn't. And that was Carlos Baldomir is the name I was trying to remember, who Zab Judah went out and lost to. And then eventually Mayweather and Baldomir fought as well. And of course, Mayweather got the win because we know Mayweather doesn't have any professional losses. So he was able to beat Baldomir after Baldomir had beat Zab Judah before he beat Zab Judah. So it was just one of those situations. So definitely, definitely a guy that definitely a situation where these interim fights could really derail some of the best fights from happening. You know what I'm saying? So it's just it's like pick your poison. Do you want to sit on the shelf and remain stagnant? Do you want to fight guys that are lower tier opposition that may not exactly get you ready for the top tier guys? Or do you want to challenge yourself and risk being beat by somebody who is good enough to derail your plans? And in a lot of cases, guys aren't trying to go out there and fight the more dangerous guys before these perceived big fights that they potentially have coming down the pipeline. So I don't necessarily fault these guys for not taking these fights, but it sucks for us as fans because a lot of times we see these guys in fights that we really don't want to see them fighting for the sake of trying to preserve something that could potentially happen down the line. Which is what the actual ranking system is supposed to take care of. The ranking system is supposed to be an instrument that kind of forces guys to fight other guys that are right there around their own ranking and kind of make some of the best fighters fight each other for the right to challenge for a title shot. But a lot of times we don't see it work out that way. We see a guy come out of nowhere like Barrios, um, and then fight a guy like Keith Thurman, who used to be champion, and them become the mandatory, for a champion such as Errol Spence Jr. So, it doesn't always work out the way I feel like it should, but it works out the way they want it to work out because they're the ones in control. So, all right, y'all. Well, ain't nobody's typing in the chat anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and shut this one down. I got some stuff I need to do anyway. I appreciate y'all coming through. You know what I'm saying? I realize you guys could have been somewhere else doing something else. But you chose to come through and listen to me talk a little boxing. Hyphy, much respect to you and appreciation for you coming through. Blessing the channel with your take and your perspective on the topics that we touched on the live stream. I'm hoping that some of the things we talked about in terms of these fights happening, in terms of guys making changes to their teams to put themselves in the best position to be successful, things like that. I hope that we get to see some of these things come to fruition as we roll into 2023. Big fight coming up this Tuesday with Inoue versus Paul Butler. That's an opportunity for Inoue or Butler to become undisputed. Next weekend, we got Michelle Rivera versus Frank Martin at 135. Those guys don't get talked about like some of these other guys at 135, but I feel like both of those guys are right there. And I think we're gonna be in for a really good fight. I know I looked at the odds, and Rivera is the underdog in that fight. So we'll see if it plays out that way. I have a suspicion that Rivera will win the fight, but I could be wrong. I know the fight's going to be out. It was initially going to take place in Minnesota, but they moved it to Vegas instead. So, it'll be a fight card from Vegas. Two rising contenders, two guys I got a lot of respect for as fighters, and I like to see fights. So, I'm definitely eager to see this fight. This is typically not the kind of fight that we get this early in guys' careers and in their progression. They usually steer guys like this away from each other so they can continue to build instead of bringing them together for a clash. So I think both of these guys are going to take this fight, take on this fight as if it's the next step in their career depends on winning or losing. So I think both of these guys have a lot to gain by winning, and they probably perceive it that they have a whole lot to lose if they aren't able to win. So I think we'll get a good fight between these two guys. Gonna come out there and give it their all. And I look forward to seeing that fight next Saturday, December 17th, coming from, normally on PBC Showtime, if I'm not mistaken, from Vegas. So, but that's all I got on it, man. Once again, I want to appreciate everybody who came through and took time to, type in the chat, listen. If you didn't type, hit the like button, dislike button, whatever you did to let your presence be felt, and bring and impose your your presence on the chat. I appreciate it. I'll catch y'all on the next one, man. It's been real.